Alrighty, howdy folks. The third section of chapter 3 is on bonds. James Bond. Anyway, so let's get on with what in the world bonds are. I'm sure you heard of bonds, right? So here is the idea behind a bond. Um, a bond is a long-term note issued by a borrower to a lender, typically for financing a large project. Okay. For instance, uh, let's say you want to build a new bridge across a river. If you do from a particular neighborhood, that would reduce the commute time of commuting for quite a few residents, right? But then you have to have money to be able to build a bridge. It costs a lot of money. So what people do typically is, in order to raise that money, they will issue bonds. For instance, the local government will issue a bond and you can purchase the bond. Okay. What is the advantage for you? You always have to ask, what's in it for me, man? Right? Good. So that I'll explain that in just a second. The note clearly specifies terms of repayment and other conditions. So when you buy a bond, that particular note, it's a long-term note. It tells you what are the specific terms of repayment, when will they repay what you bought this bond for, and things like that. Okay. And individual bonds are normally issued in denominations such as $1,000, and the stated value on the individual bond is termed as the face or par value. So every bond has something called a face value or a par value. For instance, in this example, you could be purchasing a bond for $1,000, and that is its face value. Cool. Um, Let me also tell you something. Even though the face value of the bond of this bond is $1,000, it doesn't mean that you get to buy it at exactly $1,000. You may get lucky and buy it for $900 from somebody else who had already bought this bond, but somehow they didn't like this, and or they have taken advantage of it as much as they could, and now they just want to sell it, kind of like how you sell stock. You can sell your bond, and you may get lucky and buy it for $900. Okay. That's one thing. Or the bond may be doing so well, whatever that means. I'll explain to you what that means. But right now, bond is doing well. Understand that. If it's doing well, you may need to buy this $1,000 face value bond for maybe 1,200 or 1,300. Okay. So purchase price of a bond need not be the same as the face or par value. That's one aspect I want you to know. Cool. What happens? We talked about some specific conditions and all that, right? The par value is to be repaid by the issuing organization. Hmm. So when this city government is saying, okay, we are issuing bonds to raise money to build a bridge, and you buy this $1,000 bond for whatever price you paid for it, then the after whatever 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, whatever the maturity period of the bond is, that organization is bound, duty bound, to give you $1,000 back, the face value of it. So what's the situation? You buy a bond for $1,000, let's say, and at the end of some maturity period, 5 or 10, 15, whatever years, you'll get the $1,000 back. Now, obviously, right, that is nuts. It's like the very first lesson, very first class we had. I said something like, if I ask you to give me $1,000 with a promise that after 1 year I'll give you $1,000 back, would you lend me the money? And the answer was no. Why? I can do something with that money and make money. So now, here, what am I saying? It's not even 1 year. It's possible that you get back, you buy this for $1,000, and after 5 or 10 or 15 years, you get that same $1,000 back. That is stupid. I'm not gonna do that, right? Is what you would say, and you have every right to say that. However, there is a way to sweeten the deal. Okay? So the way they sweeten the deal is, give me just a second, please. Hey. Oh, right? Oh, did I pause the recording or did I simply pause the screen sharing? I'm sorry. Um, anyway, where was I? So they need to sweeten the deal for you. Why should you buy this bond? Okay, and here is that sweetening part. In addition, the issuing unit is obligated to pay a stipulated bond rate on the face value during the interim period, date of issuance between date of issuance and date of redemption. So you buy it at t equals 0 and t equals 10, they need to give you back the face value of it. But in between t equals 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, they have to give you some like sort of an interest. It is not called interest, it's called bond rate. And that bond rate might be 10% per year, payable quarterly, or 8% per year, payable semi annually, right? So they have to give you some money. For instance, let's make it simple. You got $1,000 bond and the bond rate is 10% per year, payable yearly. So after 1 year, what do you get? Because it's $1,000 and this is 10%, $1,000 times 10%, right? 10% of $1,000, $100. So at t equals 1, t equals 0, you bought it. At t equals 1, you'll get $100. Cool. And at t equals 2, you get another $100. So each year until the bond matures, you keep getting that 10% off the 1,000. That's the whole idea. On the other hand, if it is 10% per year payable quarterly, that means 2.5%, right? 2.5% per quarter. So you get every quarter, you get 1,000 times 2.5%. That's the whole idea. Cool? All right. Um, Notation used. Yeah, let's get familiar with the notation. P is the purchase price of a bond. Now, strictly speaking, whatever is the par value of the bond, that is the price that you need to buy at, strictly speaking. But like I said, that need not be the case. It's kind of like tickets for Super Bowl. The actual ticket may be, I don't know, $100. But then if it's such an important game, you will never get the $100 ticket for $100, right? You will have to pay a lot more than that. Sort of the deal here. So P is at what price you purchase the bond, and F is the sales price. Now, this is also interesting. Or redemption value of a bond. Could F equal the par value, the sale price after the maturity period? You're just going to get your money back. You'll give this bond back. You sell this bond back to the issuing company, and you're supposed to get the par value, right? But that need not be the case. You could be selling it to somebody who is eager to buy this for you, right? And so you may be getting more than the par value for it. So you may be selling it for a bigger price than the par value. So that money is called the F. That particular sale price is called the F, or the future value, sort of. And V is the par or face value of a bond, which is what I talked about. So the bond will clearly say this is a $1,000 bond, and they will state the conditions. R is the bond rate or the coupon rate per interest period, and I is the yield rate or return on investment or rate of return per interest period. What in the world is the difference between R and I? Okay, R is the rate set by the bond itself. The bond says this is the rate at which we will pay you at every period, interest period. But then you yourself may have a certain time value of money, and that is what this I is talking about, right? Okay. Now, N is the number of interest payments received by the bondholder. So this is sort of related to the maturity period. After some, it's possible that even though this bond matures in 10 years, after eight years, you after receiving 8 years of payments, right? You may just decide to sell it at that time. So that need not be this N need not be the maturity period. That's why we have to call it by a separate variable and say that is the number of interest payments received by the bondholder. Cool. And what do you get each period? You get A, which is V times R, whatever is the par value times the bond rate. Earlier, when I showed you the example of $1,000 and 10% per year paid annually, paid yearly. So I said, oh, what you get after 1 year is $1,000 times 10%. That's exactly what this is saying. If V is the par value and R is the bond rate, V times R is the interest or coupon payment received per interest period. So per interest period, what is the amount that you would get is the par value times the bond rate. Cool. And this is a very nice figure that tells you exactly how all these terms work. You purchased at t equals 0 for a price of p, which could be equal to v, and every period you keep getting v times r, the par value times the bond rate, every time. And the very final one, this I need to call this as f because that could be v plus v times r. What? V plus vr. Is that true? Yes, right? You'd be paid v times r the very last when it finally matures. But in addition, you need to get your par value back. So f could be v plus vr, but it need not be. That's the whole point here. Cool. All right. So with that, let's the equation relating all these terms. Yeah. Now let's see if we can find an equation. Before I write the equation, can you figure out what the equation should be? How are all these terms are related? No. Isn't this a uniform series? Except this one, right? Treat f as a separate thing and find the uniform series present value with all of these and also project this f back to 0 and you are in business. So VR times 1 plus I to the n minus 1 over I times 1 plus I to the n plus uh, oh, 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 okay. Hmm. My hesitation is because I'm wondering if I goofed. Should it be n minus 1? And then we are doing this. So, or maybe the figure I should have had a VR plus F. I think in that case, this would be fine. Yeah, yeah. I think the way I drew this figure is perhaps wrong. I need to add I need to add the same arrow VR here, but on top of it put another arrow. Yeah, you know what? Why don't I do that right in front of you? Yo, what's going on? Oh, righty. So let me do this. I take, whoa, I take this guy and this guy and copy that and then move this, move that up. Move these guys. Sorry to subject you to this, but I would feel so much better if I fix my problems. Folks, I got problems. Uh, yeah, now I'm a happy man. So after receiving the bond payment, the coupon payment, you sold it for F. Yep, that fixes things. Cool. Then this formula would be correct. Dang. Okay. John plans to pay 1,050 for $1,000 loan for $1,000 12% semi-annual bond. Whoa. He plans to pay 1,050 for a $1,000 12% semi-annual bond. He will keep the bond for 3 years, receives 6 coupon payments, and then uh, he will keep and then sell it. Okay. How much should he sell the bond for to receive a yield of 10% compounded semi-annually? How much should he sell the bond for? Oh, okay. So let's work this. John plans to pay 1,050. What do you interpret that to be? Isn't that the purchase price for him? So P would be 1,050. Would you agree? The purchase price of a bond? Good. And what is this $1,000? Isn't that the par value of the bond? Okay. And 12% semi-annual bond. That means every 6 months. 12%. So F is the sales price. How much should he sell the bond for? That is something we don't know, right? And R is the bond rate per interest period. Oh, what is that? That is 0.12 divided by 2, right? 12% per year. The per year is understood. Semi-annual means every 6 months. So the bond rate per interest period, that is for every 6 months, is the yearly rate divided by 2. Would you agree? So that is 0.06. Okay. What else? And the yield rate. What is your time value of your money per interest period? It is 10% compounded semi-annually, 10% per year. So uh, per interest period, that is for 6 months, you should be 10% divided by 2 or 0.10 divided by 2, 0.05, right? Okay. And also something I like about this particular one is this kind of makes sense, right? That you actually invest in this bond. If you were to do something, whatever, you have a time value of 10% only. For instance, let's say you can put it in some kind of a bank that gives you 10%. No bank gives you 10%, by the way. But let's say, for simplicity, you put your money in a bank and the bank gives you 10% compounded semi-annually. But then there is this bond that gives you 12% semi-annual bond. So wouldn't you rather take the money from the bank and invest in this bond? because you're getting extra interest rate, a higher interest rate. That's the whole idea. That's more realistic. Cool. All right. So N is the number of interest payments received by the bondholder. How many did he receive? Plans to pay. I mean, he will keep the bond for 3 years and receive 6 coupon payments. If it is semi-annual, every 6 months, in 3 years, there is 3 times 2, 6 payments. Yeah. And then he sells it. The question is, how much should he sell it for? So, how many number of interest payments received by the bondholder is how many? 6. Cool. Now, we'll take our formula. P equals VR times 1 plus I to the n minus 1. All of this. Okay. And now, matter of plug and chug. 1050 for this. V times R. Da, 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 and one more thing you need to notice is the I is coming up here. That is the interest rate you use because you are asking yourself, with my time value of money, what is the present worth of all these payments? R is for the bond rate, right? VR, there is a rate R here involved, and there's another rate I involved here. Understand the difference between them. This R, bond rate R, is simply to figure out how much money this bond would be giving you periodically, right? As a uniform series. So face value or the par value times this R. However, once that is done, all the other calculations in your cash flow depend on your own time value of money, I. Cool? Allow that to make sense to you. Then all of this is straightforward stuff. And so when you calculate that, you get $998.99. That's what you should sell this for. If you do that, you get your 10% yield thing. In addition to, of course, you already got all these payments, right? Bond payments V times R 6 times. Cool. So John should sell the bond for $998.99. But it's possible that you may get lucky and you may need to sell it for someone for a higher price. That's a possibility. Okay. All right, let's look at another one. 8 bonds were purchased for 8,600 blah blah blah. They were kept for 5 years and coupon payments were received at the end of each of the 5 years. Immediately following receipt of the fifth coupon payment, the owner sells each bond for $62.50 more than its par value. The bond coupon rate is 8% and the owner's money yields a 10% annual return. Draw a clear, completely labeled cash flow diagram of the entire bond transaction using dollar amounts where they are known and using $X to represent the face value of the bond. Determine the face value of each bond. Okay. All right, let's see. My claim is that this represents the cash flow of what is happening. P, purchase price, was 8,628.16. So that goes at T equals 0. I'm sure you agree with me. And we get payments, right? How do we calculate the payment that we would get at each of these interest periods? Whatever the par value times the bond rate. So the bond rate is 8% and X. We don't know the par value, so we'll call it X. So X times 0.08 or 0.08X. That is for a single bond. But since we have 8 such bonds, you get 8 times 0.08X. That is what you keep getting every term. Okay. All right. So all the way up to the 5th year. And the question is, and then they say, the owner sells each bond for $62.50 more than its par value, right? So What does he sell a bond for? Whatever its par value, add a $62.50, and that's what he sells each bond for. And since there are eight of them, we are multiplying that by eight. Cool. Oof. All that thinking had to be done in order to draw this cash flow diagram. Once this is done, and the rest of it is fairly simple mathematical calculations. Cool. Purchase price of the bonds is 8,628. Par value is 8x. Sales price is 8 times x plus 6,250. And the bond rate per interest period is 0.08. I is zero point 0.1. And the number of interest payments by the 5. And so when we plug into this, we have this situation. P equals V times R for all 8 of them. And we have all of this. And which means patiently, if we were to punch all these numbers up, plug and chug and punch numbers, this is a simple equation we are expected to solve for x. It's a little more complicated than boys and girls. If 4 is equal to 2 plus 3x, what is x? It's just a little more complicated so far as numbers are concerned. And so when you calculate, x turns out to be 1,125 per bond. And for all 8 bonds, 8 times that is $9,000 for all 8 bonds. So uh, the the face value or par value of each bond, ladies and gentlemen, is $1,125. Cool. I like that example. I hope that made sense. And par value of 8 bonds is this. Amigos y amigas, adios.